attract, people that come into the state. We'll be a poorer state. We'll be a freer state. We won't have this big, gargantuous, monolithic government hanging over our heads.
So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the 10% flat tax?
There's nothing wrong with it. Right. I would love to pay a 10% tax. And everybody pays it, across the board.
Fair.
Across the board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So low, fair, predictable, especially for business folks. Small businesses, the taxes have to be predictable.
Okay, the big four: Common Core, Medicare expansion, public lands, healthcare exchange. Those are the four that have fractured the Republican Party. Where you said earlier that you come down on the kind of the Fulcher side of the equation. What do you think is number one in your book?
Number one right now, I think the number one thing that's looming, that's imminent, that's going to happen this next legislative session is Medicaid expansion. It's going to come up. I guarantee it. Butch Otter's already formed a little committee that's recommending expansion, and the legislature is going to have to come up with an alternative that makes sense for Idaho. Because right now we don't have enough primary care folks to even take care of the Medicaid patients that exist. And to pour more and more money into a model that doesn't work isn't going to make any sense, and it's just going to make us more dependent.
What's the worst part about this whole Medicare expansion thing, or just Medicare, or entitlements in general? I mean, what is it? Why is it bad? Why do you think it's bad? And what's the societal costs of these kind of entitlement programs?
Well, the cost is huge, and something happened in Idaho, and I wasn't around when it happened, so I don't know what the origin was. But Idaho
cost
at one point,
in what measure? Are you talking monetary, morality?
I'm talking money right now.
Money
There is a
right
moral
now.
cost too.
Yeah.
But from a money perspective, Idaho decided prior to when I was involved in politics that it was going to pay for everybody's health care. If you can't afford to pay, you go to the county and you fill out an indigency application, and they're going to pay for the first X amount. It used to be $10,000. I think they've increased that now. And then if that doesn't cover it, you go to the CAP board and they pay the rest. And so people started growing up in Idaho in this culture of expecting that they get the entitlement. If I need health care and I can't afford it, the county's going to pick it up, and then the rest of the taxpayers from the CAP fund are going to pick it up. And I'll tell you, when Reagan talked about once you establish an entitlement program, you'll never get rid of it, the mindset, the culture is what drives that. And so we have a bunch of Idahoans that now think they're entitled to it. It's my right to have my health care paid for by the government. You have to pay for my health care if I can't afford it. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work. And there are other models out there that make more sense, that are driven by people being able to pay for health care that's affordable out of their pocket. But what's happened is the model's been put together based on this dependency on federal funds. It's run primarily, and the prices are set by insurance companies. Doctors and hospitals are used to getting rich off of this insurance money. If you go into a hospital and you want to have I was going to say a colonoscopy, but that's not very fun. Who wants to go in and have that? But you want to go in and have a procedure, and you're going to pay with insurance, they will bill you for that procedure at a higher rate when the actual cost of the procedure is 25% of what they're able to bill. So if you pay cash coming through the door, it's 25% of the cost that they're going to quote you. Well, why the inflation? Why have this inflated mechanism? Well, it's because people making a lot of money want to continue to make a lot of money. And so, you talked about the fiscal costs. You have Medicaid expansion, you're going to bring even more federal money in. What's wrong with that? The federal government is spending even more money that they don't have. That's number one that's wrong with it. Number two, when the money flows into Idaho, you think that's going to benefit people? No, it's going to benefit the people who are already making a ton of money off a system that's designed to make hospitals a lot of money. Why do you think when Butch puts people on his committees, the legislators who are there say no to Medicaid expansion, and the people he put there who are from St. Luke's, St. Al's, local cardiologists, what do they say? Yeah, Medicaid expansion. Well, of course, it's going to keep the gravy train flowing, probably at an increased rate. So the answer, you got to change the model. And there are other models out there, including one in Washington that's kind of cool, that Senator Thane, by the way, is pitching this coming legislative session, that it would make a lot more sense. And if we can implement that kind of a plan, a direct pay plan, instead of expanding Medicaid, that's gonna be better for everybody concerned. But the moral cost is we end up with a bunch of people who think that you don't have to work. You don't have to work for what you get. And they sit back and they think they're entitled, and they blame everyone else for their problem, and you get a lack of accountability, a lack of people accepting responsibilities, and a lack of people feeling like they can chart their own destinies.
Religiously, where do you stand?
You know, I can tell you, I walk a Christian walk. I was raised Catholic, but I don't practice in the church anymore.
Okay.
And I follow a Christian lifestyle.
So, you know, one of the things that Christ said that I think is one of the moral costs of an entitlement system, and there's a huge cost, that if you have not charity, you are nothing. And government, I know some of the guys in the room here, we've talked about this and expressed our views, that government steals the opportunities of Christian people to be able to help their neighbors and receive the blessings of that help. Because Christians believe that there is a blessing for being active and helping other people, and the Good Samaritan, you know, and government has a tendency to blur those lines and to pull people out of charitable giving. Now charitable giving happens on April 15th. And, you know, you see a bum on the road, which is not very common, really, anymore. Because, you know, someone will say, don't you know you can get free food down at the, you know, down here, and there's cash assistance and housing assistance. Heck, Utah now, they've actually, I think from a monetary standpoint, have decided it's cheaper to house the homeless than to keep them on the street. So they're putting them in apartment buildings and the like. So I really feel strongly, I think a lot of people feel strongly, that that's the big moral cost, is that we lose, and I think most Christians believe that this is a special land. It's a land that's blessed because Alexis de Tocqueville, in A Democracy in America, you've probably heard of that book, says America's great because she's good. And if she ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. And that, I think, is the real moral cost, and that we're shifting the responsibility. We don't give out of our pockets now, we give out of our, you know, our withholdings.
Right, well, it's not a voluntary act.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, charity ought to be a voluntary
Absolutely.
act. And no, you're absolutely right. And even beyond that, the other impacts that you feel in the community, government and the way that it's interjected itself has destroyed our ability to have cohesive communities and fellowship within the communities. We don't care for our neighbors the way we used to. We're distracted. We're working 2-3 jobs, some families. We're worrying about our kids because we're not home to raise them. And the communities are not as strong as they used to be. And that's going to be another thing that's going to come back to bite us. So
the haters of capitalism believe that men left to their own devices will not help their neighbors, will not help the needy. How in the world what's going to happen if he goes into the hospital, gets in a wreck and goes into the hospital and he doesn't have insurance? Do you believe in the human spirit? Do you believe that men will do what's right if given the opportunity to see the suffering, to view it? I mean, there may be I'll let you answer that.
Sure. No, I think that there are two schools of thought, of course, and I subscribe to the school of thought that man is inherently good. And I think that when faced with a choice to help somebody in need, most people will help. I think that's in our nature. And what you said, you know, I don't know that I've seen any data to support that capitalism equals people not helping their neighbor. I don't see that. Huh. Where's that data from? You know, I've seen these little clips that you see, you know, woman getting attacked on the street and everybody's just walking by doing nothing about it. But, you know, I've seen some, you know, you talk about bums on the street, some homeless people in Boise, they have a homeless problem there. And I see a lot of giving. And, you know, the homeless shelter that's down that feeds these folks that have no place to stay, no place to eat, it's not government handout. I mean, it's private charity. And so I disagree with that assertion, and I don't think the data supports it.
So in my belief, we do not protect the inherent rights of the people by creating an entitlement program that steals the opportunity for service, community service, this cohesiveness of communities. So I'm pretty much done with my questions. So what do you want to say to the voters? Give us your impassioned plea of why John Bujak should be the next governor of this great state of Idaho.
You know, and we've gone over it during this interview. Idaho is at a crossroads. Our current leadership has left us in a terrible state, and everybody that's looking at it from the outside recognizes that. No one believes what Governor Otter is saying about Idaho being a great state, number 5 for business, whatever he's touting in his latest commercial. We're in trouble, and we're at a crossroads. And this next legislative session in Boise is going to be a big one. And there's things on the table that have to be addressed, important issues, the Common Core issue. Medicaid expansion is going to be the big one coming up. If you're not happy with Butch Otter and you're looking for another choice, there are 2 other viable choices. There's Belukoff, the Democrat, and there's me. If you put Belukoff in office, what you're going to get is 4 years of stalemate, because the legislature will not be able to work with him. And so get used to the status quo. It might not get worse, but it sure as heck ain't going to get better. If you put me in the executive chair, I've been a Republican my whole life. I understand conservative values. The Republican Party, a large portion of them, wanted to see Russ Fulcher win. And I can bring those same principles and standards to the governor's office, work with the Republican legislature, and change the course of government in Idaho. And you know, look at me, I'm a third-party candidate. It would be the first time a third-party candidate went the distance. But if you've ever cared about the future of this state, if you've ever cared about the future of your children going forward, you need to put someone in office who's going to change the course. And if you leave traditional 2-party politics to do the job, you're going to be disappointed every time. So vote for something other than politics as usual. Go to the polls, get off the couch, register to vote if you haven't. It counts this time more than it's ever going to count. As Idahoans, we're fighters at heart. Don't sit back and accept that you have to take the R or the D. Get off the couch and fight. You don't need to draw your gun. You don't need to throw a punch. You just need to go down to the polls, get registered, and check the box next to my name. And I'll take it from there.
Awesome. Well, John, have you ever watched Napoleon Dynamite?
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Good. You know what weapon is the most useful when fighting the Wolverine?
I don't know.
A freaking 12 gauge. What do you think? Anyway, so just you're warned that you know your political detractors are out buying 12 gauges right now. So get ready, John, the Wolverine, Bujak. We hope to see good things out of you. Thanks for the interview.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Hey, thanks. All right. Thanks.